Hello everyone, Johnson here, and welcome to this quick video on configure Azure Service Endpoint Policy. In my last video, we talked about how to use Azure Service Endpoint and Azure Storage Account built-in firewall to lock down your Azure storage accounts. By default, Azure Storage Account is configured with a public endpoint and is accessible via Internet. Without Service Endpoint, your Azure virtual machines also access your Azure storage account via Internet using their public IP addresses. To lock Azure storage account down and provide enhanced security, we can create a Service Endpoint in Azure Virtual Network Sublets. It provides a direct route over the Azure backbone network from the sublet to the storage account. So there are no extra hops to slow down traffic, and then we can configure the Azure storage account's built-in firewall to only allow certain virtual network sublets. After we plug in the service endpoint to a sublet, the virtual network resource, such as Azure Virtual Machine, uses a private IP address to connect to the storage account over the Azure backbone network. Just keep in mind that this only applies to storage accounts in the same or paired region of the virtual network. If the Azure virtual machines have public IP addresses, they still can use their public IP addresses to access Azure storage accounts in other Azure regions. However, even with the security and performance benefits of Service Endpoint, there is still a problem. This does not stop the virtual machine to read the data from your storage account and then copy it to another storage account. The target storage account could be a storage account in another subscription or even in another tenant. What this means is that a malicious insider could create a storage account on their personal subscription and use it to exfiltrate data via the service endpoint in your subscription if the destination storage account is in the same or paired region of the virtual machine. The insider could also exfiltrate data via internet to a storage account in another region if the virtual machine has a public IP address configured. This scenario is also called data extrusion or data exploitation, which is considered a form of data theft. Now we understand the potential risk, so how can we address it? The solution is service endpoint policies. Currently is only enabled for Azure storage accounts. A service endpoint policy defines a scope and can be associated to one or more service endpoints. The scope only allows access to all storage accounts in a subscription, all storage accounts in a resource group, or a single storage account. In this example, we can configure the service endpoint to allow virtual machines in sublet A to send traffic only to storage account A and not to storage account B or storage account C. So to demonstrate this, let's jump to Azure Portal. Here I have a storage account demo in tenant 01, which has a public container with anonymous read access. So if we have a look at the access level, it's been configured to blob, which allows anonymous read access for blobs only. And in this container, I have a JPEG file, jetty.jpg. And to prove my point, in another Azure tenant, I have another storage account, demo in tenant 02, which also has a public container with anonymous read access. And under this container, there is another JPEG file, handling.jpg. To verify the accessibility, I have an Azure virtual machine, VM-Australia East-sublet 01. So if we go down to this virtual machine and go networking, and then go sublets, and in this virtual network, I have 3 sublets. Sublet 01, 02, and 03. If I go into service endpoints, under the settings sections, as you can see here, I have enabled service endpoint for both sublet 01 and 02, but not for sublet 03. And the locations are Australia East and Australia Southeast. So as we mentioned before, this means that the virtual machines in these two sublets will use their private IP addresses to access the storage accounts in region Australia East and Australia Southeast. If the virtual machines have public IP addresses, they could also use them to access the Azure storage accounts outside of these two regions. Now I have RDP'd to the VM in sublet 01, and if I go back to the storage account demo in tenant 01 and go under the containers, find out the JPEG file, and then go to the property and copy the URL. And then if I copy the URL into my virtual machine's web browser, so here you can see that I have access to this JPEG file. And similarly, if I go to the other storage account and find the JPEG file and then copy the URL and try the same thing from the virtual machine, so you can see that I have access to this file as well. And by the way, this is the jetty of another beautiful beach in South Australia, Henley Beach. So in this scenario, if I was a malicious user, I could easily copy data from the storage account in tenant 01 to the storage account in tenant 02, which could be my personal Azure tenant. So to prevent this, let's create a service end policy. So this needs to be done in the source tenant. Here from the Azure portal search bar, I will search service endpoint policies and select the policy service. I will then click the Add button, which brings me to the policy creation wizard. Just like other resources, it needs a subscription, a resource group, a location, and a name. So the subscription and locations has to be the same as the service endpoint and the virtual network that we are going to associate this policy to. So the sublet or service endpoint I want to lock down is in MVP subscription 1 and Australia East. And I am gonna name it my policy and put it into test-rg resource group. Next, then I need to define the scope for this policy to allow access by adding a resource. So currently this solution is only available for Azure storage. And for the scope, we can select all accounts in subscription, all accounts in resource group, and single account. In this case, let's do single account and then select the subscription, which is MVP for my storage account, and then resource group in load balancer resource group, and the resource is the demo in tenant 01. Then add, and let's review and create this policy. So this validation is passed, so let's just create this policy. Now this policy has been created. Let's go to the resource and select associated sublets under the settings section. As you can see from here, it currently doesn't have any sublets associated. I'm gonna click edit sublet association. Here from the virtual network list, I can select my target virtual network, VNet-Australia East-02, and then select sublet 01. Here I can only select sublet 01 or sublet 02, and the other sublet 03 in this virtual network is not listed here. That's because sublet 03 doesn't have storage service endpoint enabled. Okay, so let's apply this configuration. And now if we go back to the virtual network, let's select VNet-Australia East-02 and then go to service endpoints. Here we can see that the locations for sublet 01 has been changed to asterisk. And for sublet 02 is still Australia East and Australia Southeast. So what does this mean? This means that the virtual machines in sublet 01 have to use their private IP addresses to access Azure storage accounts, even they have public IP addresses, and no matter in which region these storage accounts are. And also because this sublet 01 has been associated with the service endpoint policy I just created, the virtual machines in this sublet can now only access storage account demo in tenant 01, which is the only one being allowed in that policy. So before I jump to the virtual machine RDP session to verify the accessibility, I would like to show you one more thing, which is the effective routes for the sublet. Currently, Azure doesn't provide any way to do that from the sublet or virtual network level. So I have to go to virtual machine VM-Australia East-sublet 01. So here we just go back to the virtual machine and then select the virtual machine and then go networking, select the network interface, and then go effective route. Now we can see that there is an extra route entry, which has 499 address prefixes, and that pretty much includes all the current IP address ranges used by Azure Storage Service. Okay, so finally, let's go back to the virtual machines RDP session and refresh the web pages. So just in case the pictures are cached on this virtual machine, I'm gonna clear the web browser's local cache and delete all of them, and then go back to the pages to refresh them. So first of all, I will just refresh the storage account demo in tenant 01. So as you can see that I still have access to this storage account. Now let's do the same thing for the other storage account. And here you can see that now I lost my access to this storage account, which is the storage account demo in tenant 02 because it is not listed in the policy I just created. Even this storage account is in a subscription and an Azure tenant different from the policy. All right, thank you for watching. If this video is useful, please give it a like, subscribe, comment, and share. That's it. Until next time, take care.